Welcome to Be Evolved, a podcast for parents and educators who prioritize developing possibility and expansion within the total educational process for themselves and their children or students. We invite you to listen to the podcast with your child or student in mind and with yourself at the center of the learning experience. Ultimately, our goal is to bridge the gap between educational expertise and research, translating it into practical action. Gaining knowledge plus taking action is what it means to be evolved. Okay, so that was really an amazing conversation. I'm here now with Randi Dumont, who works here at Evolved. Hi, Randi.
Hi, good morning.
So Randi and I were listening in on the conversation that we just had with Gapwell, with Seth and Lee and Miles, and we are so impressed. We feel really grateful that they are listening to students. We feel really grateful that students are learning from mentors who are a couple years older than them, really learning about what is possible for them. And at the same time that I was bringing Gapwell into this conversation for this podcast, Randi and I have been talking about something on Randi's heart, which is that she is forming a offer for students in the college years called Holistic Mentorship. And this is so exciting to Evolved because we are all about working one-to-one with students and making sure that they learn and live well. And surely our work is relational. Our work is about putting educators with students to help them through their learning processes. So I wanted to piggyback the conversation we just had, which gave you parents so much in terms of what to think about as far as, going into these next years. And now I want to introduce holistic mentorship to you and give it to you as an offer, something that you can sign your kids up for as a starting freshman, as a sophomore, as a junior, as a senior, even whichever year you're in. And Randi's going to talk a little bit about this, but from a parent perspective, I have a kid who is 1 year out of college, and I can definitely say I want Randi with him during that first year because, and I'm going to tell you why, there's an importance of getting all this information that Gapwell's giving the children. It's really great content, and it's important to have a trusted adult in your child's life during these times of vulnerability so that they can have someone to know them and learn about them and help them process all of the decisions and resources and things that are available to them, but it's in a relational container. So if let's just say I know for myself, I have a coach, right? And if I am having a difficult time, I reach out to her. We don't have to start with tell me about who you are, tell me about your goals, tell me about what is your profile, tell me about your strengths and your areas of challenge. That's already been done. We've done that work together. And now we work in a container in which she can help me process different obstacles and challenges that I have as a business owner, a mom, a wife, a sister, a daughter, all of the different things, right? And it helps me to move through my life as a learner in a way that connects back to my intention, to my anchor, to who I want to be in this world, right? And in a healthy way too, because sometimes you can have dysfunctional thinking and not even really know it without having somebody come and say, how are you really thinking about that? I'm thinking about it this way. Well, have you thought about it this way instead? No, I actually have not, right? So when Randi came to me and talked to me about this, first of all, Randi's background is in education. She's an educator. She's a mom. She has this amazing ability to connect with kids. She has a mental health background in that she really understands that part of it. She understands this age group really well. And I said, we've got to do this together. So I'm really excited to introduce Randi and her work to you as another level of resource. So Randi, why don't we start just by you? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to start?
No, I think you set that up very well, Mary. I appreciate it. I think the three words that stuck out to me were relational, container, and processing. And I think I want to start just by giving some context to where this idea came from for me. I mean, I came from, prior to Evolved, a boarding school setting. As both a student, I went to boarding school as a student, and I worked for 10 years at a residential school, in Massachusetts, and I adored the work. And, as I evolve in my life, in my career, I try to really connect to what's rooting me in my passions, my values, how I understand my sense of self. And I think what I keep coming back to is the impact of relationships and how we maintain those in our lives and what they give us and how they help us see and understand ourselves even. So, this whole idea came from being a trusted adult in a residential boarding school setting, working with a bunch of high school kids who didn't have their parents accessible to, accessible via text and phone, but part of what we did was in loco parentis, which is like you are parenting other people's children, essentially. And the work that I felt, and I know they felt, because, I hear from kids all the time now that are, in college, out of college, they're adults. I see them in New York City. We have dinner, they come back to you because of the impact that you've made on them and vice versa. They teach me a ton too. So, in thinking about what do kids today need and how does that connect to what's on my heart and what roots me in my life? I really wanted to roll out this holistic mentorship as a space for kids to, first of all, be seen and known. I think particularly for college students, and what our friends just talked about at Gapwell, social isolation is such a barrier for a lot of these kids. They will have a trusted adult to be relational with, to practice socializing with nothing at stake, right? I'm not a teacher. I'm not someone that they're trying to make friends with. I'm a sounding board, right? I'm a sandbox. I'm a place they can go and try things on, right? And communicate with. So there's that piece. I think that, the holistic mentorship also supports just day-to-day, challenges, like you said, Mary. It's a space for processing. So they're seen and known, but then their challenges are also in the context of who they are. They're all relative to who we are. Something that I might find challenging may not be challenging to you, Mary, right? So it's not just like all right, here's some tips to navigate blah, 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 right? Student A might, tackle, the challenge of, I don't know, doing their laundry differently than student B. What's really getting in the way there for student A versus student B? So I think, the holistic mentorship is the relational, the adult, the trusted adult, but then the processing that you have to do to actually problem solve alongside the student. Because again, similar to what our Gapwell friends were talking about, you can't solve it for them. This isn't like just someone in place of a parent who's going to be like, yes, here you go, do it this way. This is building soft skills with them and processing, their challenges with them. And the third piece, the language that you use, Mary, is container. It's all done in a safe space, in a singular space that is just for them. It's not a group meeting. It's not a seminar. It's not a digital content that they can consume on their own. This is real time for you to do your processing with somebody that knows you. So those were kind of the three pieces that spoke to me based on how you set it up. But also I wanted to give a little bit of context to why we're doing this. I want to bring that trusted adult aspect from boarding school into the college space. Obviously we can't reach everybody, but God, it made such an impact for me as a kid and for the kids that I worked with as an adult when I worked as a trusted mentor in a boarding school setting. So that's a little bit of the context and also some of the key elements.
And what do you think, if you could just qualify this a little bit further for parents? So if you're thinking parents, you're saying, okay, so I'm framing this up, right? I'm thinking I'm a parent, I've got a child going to college in a year, 2 years, whatever. And now I know Gapwell is here to give me some content that's really going to be helpful. But there's this other piece that you are now talking about, which is a bit deeper. It's definitely more personal. And if I think about it, where do you feel the end game is for a student who has the holistic mentorship as part of their college process versus a student who perhaps does not? Can you sort of lay that out for us?
The end game for someone.
Where does a child sort of finish the journey, let's just say, if they have that part? That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that a lot of this and a lot of how I see this going is, we've talked a lot about this before and, the conversation with Gapwell kept hinting around this. And then Miles, I think, ended with, sort of an anecdote that touched more directly on mental health and keeping mental health managed. And understood. And I mean, and it's that piece of you is always changing. There is no, it's not like, okay, you can pick a career and here's your path. Your mental health is like constantly shifting and moving, and you have to negotiate and manage it all the time. Right. So I think for me, the way that I see this work is that, yes, there's identity development, executive function support, there's emotional growth, there's problem solving elements, there's soft skill building, academic and life preparation, but I think we're going to look at a lot of that through the lens of, where is your mental health at? And how is your mental health maybe supporting some of these things or working as a hindrance against you, right? So for example, I think in terms of end game, I think, the framework is really that, we want kids to be able to process and reflect and build resilience and emotional wellness, or resilience in the realm of emotional wellness, because I believe that with anxiety and depression, social isolation just like skyrocketing right now with these kids who are currently in college, you have to do this work with them. Even if they're not sort of presenting, I mean, this is not like, oh, we're diagnosing, mental health issues and treating them. This is more of a non-clinical reflective space where they can build skills that support their emotional wellness. And I think the end game is that they learn how to identify some of those helpful habits that they have, or helpful cognitive processes, or helpful cognitions and thoughts, and also be aware of the areas of their cognitions and behaviors that aren't helpful to them, right? Where are your positive feedback loops? Where are your negative ones? Why are they happening? How does this loop help you? How does this loop get in the way? Right? I hear a lot of people talk about, well, kids don't do this. They don't plan well. They're not using a calendar. There's no, sort of like drive. They're not able to problem solve. Well, okay, well, what's getting in the way of that? And I think that's really the question that we answer a lot in these holistic mentorship sessions is like, okay, you want to be, I don't know, you want to be going to class every day. Okay, great. What's getting in the way of that, right? Let's talk about what happens to get you from, when you wake up in the morning to when class starts. What's happening in between there? And sometimes it's not even just like, it's like Occam's razor, which is like sometimes the solution is the simplest one. It's right in front of you, right? And sometimes it's just a matter of, processing that together. Right. So I think end game, with this service is helping illuminate some of these processes for kids and helping them learn how to short circuit and change the ones that are unhelpful, and then reinforce the processes that are very helpful for them. Right. And that can be for any human being. This is not like a remedial, like you're in crisis mode, let's develop a plan. This is for every single person who experiences life. We're all dealing with these kinds of things. So
I think college students are a particularly vulnerable population to be doing this work because of the independence that they're experiencing, because of the challenges and the optionality that they then have around handling all of these different new schemas that they have to set up in their brains. And these are big, educator words, but let's just break that down a little bit for anybody who's listening. It's, if you are going into a brand new situation, your brain has to build what we call a schema, a map of what it is that you're actually experiencing. You have to be able to process the new environment. And let's say you're going into a lecture hall. You have to now absorb that you're now in a room with maybe 500 seats. Where are you going to sit? What's the expectation that you have in that seat? What's the vantage point of the information you're getting? What are you supposed to do with the information? What do you do when there's lots of noise or energy coming from this side of the room? And how do you regulate yourself? And, you're building all of this without really even knowing it, but it takes a great deal of energy. So on top of all of those new experiences that students are having almost on a daily basis, they're colliding with new kids, new friends, new walks of life. I know when I went to NYU a million years ago now, but I had not met students from anywhere but my town where I was in high school. And I met people from literally all over the world with all kinds of religions and interests and backgrounds. And I was overwhelmed by just, how do I even
Yeah.
have this conversation? Do they want to know about me? I don't know. I don't know how to exactly put myself out there. And in the midst of all of that, I also want to be developing myself to some degree. And I can tell you that all of that happens in a much more healthy way when we have a trusted adult and a mentorship container, a holistic mentorship container. So the whole idea of this work, it also happens already. It evolved within a lot of our tutoring programs, which are really centered around a particular subject or test process. But our tutoring here is very relational as well. And it definitely contains a process of getting to know the student and really giving them ways to do the work that works for them. But when you're dealing with a young adult, you can bring it into a more holistic process because those students are ready to learn more independently within every area of their lives, as opposed to within the system of their homes or schools. So we're really bringing the work into that period of a student's life. And I think it's very exciting. I think it's really right on point in terms of what we need to do with this particular group of students. And I'm really excited for Evolve to offer it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you made a good point at the end. It's like, the environment shift creates a whole another ecosystem of challenges for kids. They could be functioning very well and learning very well where they are right now in high school. And you can teach them to look out for X, Y, and Z, and you can help them prepare, in essence, for college. And we still don't know exactly how they might function in this new environment, right? Environment is a huge piece of the kind of behavioral formula, right? How is this environment going to change your behavior potentially? And how do you work within this new ecosystem? So I think having somebody in real time that you meet with regularly to process all of these changes and transitions and questions that you have about what's next for me. And then it could be from, the work that will span is anything from, what's a calendaring system that's going to work for me to, how do I create a sense of belonging for myself in this new environment? How do I plug in and connect to, let's think about the future. What does the future look like for me? Okay, well, there's a lot of questions we need to answer to get to the end of that, right? To really understand where you might want to plan, yourself to go. So yeah, I just feel very passionate, I think, about being able to give young people a space to connect. And I also, too, I think, the more I'm doing this work, this also reminds me of the work I was doing at boarding school. Parents benefit from this, too, because, I'm not just talking to the kids, I'm actually helping some parents negotiate, like, what is their new role here? Like, my child is now away from home. Do I step back? I think a lot of parents try to step back, but they're still kind of problem solving, like the Gapwell folks said, they're still sort of problem solving via text or, trying to do a lot of prompting to get kids to go in the right direction or what they should be doing. There's a lot of stress coming from parents, that they're either projecting onto their kids that then feel their stress, that reciprocal stress, or they're holding on to and they're not sure how to manage. So, I'm also doing some coaching with parents. I just worked with a parent recently who was like, this all sounds great, how to, communicate with him and stuff, but he doesn't call us. We don't hear from him. How do we have this conversation or how do we initiate this if we don't hear from him? And Miles said something really important, which is like, let the kid determine sort of like the frequency of the contact. That's great. But you also have to think about the modality, right? Like kids these days, like I don't want to get on the phone for a half hour at a time. It feels in our busy lives like too much to stop. And I know that, a lot of parents can't connect with that because they talked on the phone and they still do, right? But kids now don't. College kids are not, some of them will. Sure, some of them will. But so I said to the parent, maybe you just drop a voice note. You just say, hey, just checking in. I want to say hi. I heard you had a meeting with Randy. Just wanted to know how it goes. Invite him into the conversation without making any demands. All right, how did you plan this? What's the plan for this? What did you decide on? Just invite him into the conversation and say, hey, if you want to hit me with a voice note back, that's great. Give him another option other than all right, you have to call me.
I love that. That's such a good way of explaining the optionality of it all. We all, as parents, we just desperately love that connection. And I think that we are just humans in that we want to do it in the way that we like to do it too. But when you're in a relationship, you have to navigate the wants and needs of the other. And especially as your child is getting into young adulthood, who they are is evolving quite rapidly. And so my mother, I remember, told me this. She said, I never, ever saw you guys, her kids, change more than in the first year of college. She said, you went, you came home. I didn't even recognize who that person was. And there wasn't a lot of opportunity then to connect. I personally, as a mom, I've always really operated best from having a job description. And so as my kids have aged, my job description used to be that I was responsible for keeping them alive and, feeding them, clothing them, getting them to sleep, a lot of those kinds of things, guiding them, making decisions for them, getting the executive functioning done from the outside in. Then it shifts as they get into that adolescence. And now you're navigating a little bit of that responsibility, hands off. Let's see how you do with this. Let's put this into your bucket of responsibility, not mine. And now that they're even older, I find that my texts are usually just love and I just want to connect. Hi, I really have actually no agenda. I just want to say I'm thinking of you. I'm sending you a heart emoji. For sure. One of my kids is he doesn't probably want to talk a ton, but I'll send a little statement of short kind or do a car ride or a walk because I know that's something we enjoy doing together. But you have to kind of follow their lead, and ultimately it requires some adjustment and check-in over their lives, and each of your kids are going to be different. And I think this is where the work is also really exciting, is that in learning work, we know it's not uniform. It's not one size fits all. It's not even constant. It's a completely dynamic situation, which makes it really complicated. And so when you deal with a human to a human, you're able to handle those complexities in a really important way. And this is what Evolve's work is all about. And we love organizations like Gapwell and even schools and curriculum and even the internet or chat or all the things that tell us ideas. But ultimately, we need to enmesh those ideas into human relationships, into human experiences. And that requires this service that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I want to sort of wrap up by just, letting people know that, yes, I think this idea is largely coming out of my own experiences and what I've seen impact kids, but it's also coming out of empirical research that states the impact of a trusted adult in a child's life between ages 10 to 25 in particular. And, I'm adopting a lot of the framework from this amazing book that just came out in August of last year by Yeats is the last name. I think it's Daniel Yeats, Yeats, and it's called 10 to 25, basically the science of motivating young adults. And it talks about, first of all the research that they've done around adolescent motivation and the mentorship mindset, or a mindset and a form of coaching that seeks to collaborate, empower, and build skills with students rather than, stepping in as just another adult that's, do this, do that. You should be doing this and you should be doing that. It's very much coming from a collaborative framework that is evidence-based. So I want to reinforce that point that, I'm not just out here being like, I love working with kids and this is so fun for me, but a lot of what they're talking about in terms of the mentorship mindset is a lived experience of mine in my professional life. So I've gotten really good at that. The research and the framework that's not new to me, but I think if you want to ground yourself in some of like the framework around what this mentorship offering is built around, go read that book. It's amazing. And I think it's just a great book for anyone to read who works with young people, parents, young people. So yeah, I want to say that piece is really important for people to know too, that it's not just coming out of thin air and a passion. It's actually rooted in some real science.
Yes. Absolutely. And I love that. I love that about your work and about also this age group and the potential for it. And we'll definitely put that book and the where to find it in the show notes as well. So yes, if you're interested in talking with Randi, she's found at Randi, Randi at evolveded.com. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. And you can book a session with her. And then you can also book her for the entire semester to make sure your child has the container to work on all of the things that we just discussed for their year. So I'm really happy to have this as an offer here at Evolved. I'm so happy to have your attention, listener, during this important episode that we did today to help you prepare for college. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any additional questions, just reach out to us. We'll make you a short podcast or we'll help you through whatever questions that you have with our offers and other associations that we're helping you to make sure your child is learning and living well, because that's what it's all about here. So thank you so much, Randi.
We hope you found this episode of Be Evolved helpful. If you did, please be sure to like, review, and subscribe. It really helps us to reach more listeners like you. Want to dive deeper into specific strategies? Join me on Supercast as a subscriber. For just $5 a month, you'll get access to my private weekly feed where I share exclusive ideas and answer audience questions about learning and admissions. Have a question or comment? I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out anytime at admin@evolveded.com. That's ADMIN at EVOLVEDED.com. And don't forget, you can find the full transcript for today's episode, along with our terms, conditions, and disclaimers and privacy policies at evolvededucationcompany.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, learn well, live well, and be evolved.